Go Team Rangers, Megamorphin Team.
Oh, hey, didn't see you there. I was just playtesting my Megamorphin Teamer Rangers deck. Welcome to Hoarding Wombat Collectibles. My name is Tom, and today we're going to jump back into the Dragons of Tarkir clans and the main story for the final conclusion of the entire history of the Tarkir plane before we move on to the most recent updates on the plane in Tarkir Dragonstorm. If you missed my last few videos on the Khans of Tarkir and Dragons of Tarkir Part 1, you can watch those in the playlist right here. But if you're all up to date, let's dive back in with our last three clans, the Kolaghan, Atarka, and Dromoka. The Kolaghan share many similarities with the previous timeline's Mardu clan. They have very little organization, and they all fight for power amongst themselves when they are not raiding. They strike fast and brutal, embodying the lightning speed of their Dragon Lord's flight. The urge to fight is described as the crave, which can be manifested into a crazed bloodlust, in which they need to battle and assert their dominance over anything in their path, even other Kolaghan. This frenzy is especially potent when they are in the presence of Kolaghan's dragon brood. Dragon Lord Kolaghan herself exudes this rage as well, taking pleasure in the thrill of the hunt even more than the actual meat itself. She constantly feeds her need for dominance by continuously taking new territories, then decimating them with her lightning breath. Few can understand her desires, as she does not speak human or draconic. She rules her clan with little need for formal titles or rank. The clan is simply ordered with dragons on top and Kolaghan above all. The humanoids in the clan follow whichever dragon they choose and set off into raiding parties at a moment's notice. The clan relies on Kolaghan's body language and fierce lightning punishments to understand what she craves. But even with this hostility, they admire her predatory bloodlust, which is seen in their concept, "To ruin is to rule." The idea of taking pride in disrupting well-laid plans of other armies, feasts for new dragons being born, and destroying civilization in general. The Kolaghan see their destruction as freedom from rules and the laws of society. As they abhor civilization, the Kolaghan don't claim any territory for their clan, but they do dominate a large stretch of swampland called Screamreach, where the Horde can do as they please. They achieve this dominance through their blitz tactic fighting style and devastating lightning magic. The Kolaghan have little use for the ancestral bows of the Mardu, as they opt to use bolt channeling, a form of lightning magic where they absorb the energy of the dragon's lightning breath through lightning rods they wear on their armor, and redirect it towards their enemies. Although this does not always work and can be catastrophic for the bearer of the lightning rod. The Kolaghan can also channel this lightning into their mounts, increasing their speed to the point where they sometimes are explosive as they smash into the enemy flank. They call this practice thunder battering, as the mounted horde sounds like rolling thunder as they ride through the steppe. Although this horde is highly disorganized, we at least can make out a few differences between the troops. First and most obvious are the Warkites, the giant war veterans of Kolaghan's brood. They have experimented with different methods of devastation, such as dive bombing their enemies in spiraling patterns, creating a tornado effect, raining debris down on their enemies. They also partake in the Chasm's Rake, a form of psychological warfare, where they fly through tight canyons leading to the Kolaghan lands, scraping their wings as they fly, creating scorched lines in the cliffside, discouraging any would-be invaders. On the other end of the size spectrum are the Shriek Bandits, goblins who take a different approach to dominance by stealing and pillaging all they can get as they travel with the Horde. They use a shrill type of war shriek that incapacitates and distracts enemies, allowing the goblins to get away with their loot. The remainder of the main horde is comprised of the standard Kolaghan warrior, the most skilled of which are considered clashers. But there are a couple units who exist on the fringe of the horde. The Bloodchins are ruthless cannibalistic humanoids that believe they gain their power from feasting on other humanoids' flesh, attributing them to their namesake. The Shamans of the Foul Tongue are also aptly named. They ride on the outskirts of the horde in isolation, often choosing to follow a Kolaghan broodling until they are randomly reunited with their clan. They get their name from the bastardized Draconic they speak, which is thought to be a version of Ugin's original tongue, demented through years of dark influence. Within these new groups of warriors, there are some familiar faces which have new lives in this timeline. Zurgo is no longer considered Helm Smasher, but rather Bellstriker, alluding to his new role as Kolaghan's personal messenger and attendant. When Kolaghan awakes from her rest and seeks battle, Zurgo arouses the horde through the clan Dragon Bell, striking it with his greatsword, Although this job would be seen as beneath the great title of Khan in another timeline, Zergo is still an adept warrior, and even has formed his own following, even though most of them are sent into battle to die for the sake of loyalty. Another character we will see in the main story is Vial Smasher, known as Ankleshank in a previous timeline. She uses vials of dragon fire as her main weapon on the battlefield. She recklessly wields these vials to rain fire on enemies on the battlefield, but would not hesitate to use them anytime she feels threatened. Lastly, we have Grabar Brazil, descendant of Uruk Brazil, who we know in the Khan's timeline as a loyal crewmar to the Abzan. But as we will see, the Dromoka do not yield to the crewmar tradition of the Abzan, leaving the orc to stay with his original clan, keeping the humanoids in line under Kolaghan, harshly scolding those who fail to honor the Dragon Lord. We get more information about Grabar Brazil in the side story, The Guardian, which we will briefly discuss as we take a look at our next clan, the Dromoka. In stark contrast to Kolaghan's anti-civilization ideals, the Dromoka value community between humanoid and dragon to serve their Dragon Lord, from which they get their name. Although the dragons are undoubtedly the dominant species in the clan, they work together with their humanoids, sharing the work and their skills in order to survive in the harsh deserts in which they live. Unlike most clans, the vast majority of the Dromoka humanoids understand Draconic, and the vast majority of the dragons in the clan understand the common tongue. This provides for mutual understanding, as each of the two species only have the anatomy to speak their native tongue. They value the endurance they have and strive to make their life meaningful and honor their Dragon Lord in any way they can. Unlike most of the Dragon Lords, Dromoka is seen to be just as merciful as she is authoritative. She has learned to value patience in the belief that her clan will outlast all other clans on Tarkir. She takes an attentive role in her clan, frequently flying to each outpost to communicate with her broodlings' officers and their most honorable humanoids. If a settlement is seen to be stable and strong, she will move on with little intervention. But if she smells weakness in her followers, she quickly dispatches justice in the form of a beam of light from her breath, or devours the culprit whole so they can sustain the clan in another way. The outposts she visits are called Aeries, pyramid-like structures that jut out from the harsh sand topography. Their tops are wide and completely open to allow for easier access by dragon visitors. It is at these oases where the humanoids and dragons both reside in their clusters called families. A family consists of a prominent dragon at the head, with brothers and sisters consisting of Aven, Enoch, and humans. These relationships are very similar to the bondkin of the Abzan in another timeline, as they are not blood related, but they still form a strong bond as they progress their community within the area and defend their dragon caretaker. Young Dromoka humanoids are raised communally within the area, with some even being traded to another area away from their birth parents. This leads the other clans to believe that all Dromoka are orphans, when in reality is the opposite. The entire clan can be considered their family. This thought removes any dispute that would arise due to socioeconomic differences. No Dromoka humanoid is born with more rights or privileges when compared to another, and advancement is strictly based on merit. The focus of the Dromoka humanoids is on honor, achieved only through acts of endurance, strength, and leadership. Humanoids are to protect themselves and others in their clan in order to gain an honorable burial when they eventually pass on. Even the dragons use their strength and superiority to protect their humanoid clan members from attacks by other dragons. This is seen in the practice of dragon guardianship. Scale Lord dragons are the respected frontline officers of the Dromoka army. They strive to protect all members of their clan, including humanoids, from oncoming attacks, while dishing out harsh punishments to those who betray the clan. Although Scale Lords have little interaction with the basic Scale Guard infantry, who only mimic the dragon scale, some of the elite and more respected humanoid warriors are honorable enough to earn the actual dragon scales from their Scale Lords, which they incorporate into their armor. A practice that is both a symbolic and effective defense. Some of these warriors are prominent enough to gain the title Foremost, which is the most elite class of warrior in the Dromoka, who are able to gain audience with the Dragon Lord herself. Although the Dromoka have great strength with their Scale Lord and Scale Guards, their real defense is seen in the Aeries. They are built with thick walls surrounding the main structures and heavy doors allowing for only Dromoka armies to enter and exit during times of war. However, there are times when supply chains and quarters are needed at the front lines, and for this the Dromoka deploy the mobile roosts, massive rolling platforms pulled by enormous Krushok beasts, where dragons can rest and recover from their battles alongside the humanoids, allowing for greater effectiveness in battle. There are some key locations that we will look at where these Aeries reside. First and foremost being the Great Aerie and the city of Arashin. The Grand City sits above a large outcrop overlooking the desert sands, with the walled Aerie encompassing the entire hill it sits on. This is the main roost of Dragon Lord Dromoka and is a prominent hub for trade, politics, and militia. It is an impermeable structure by land and is heavily patrolled by Dromoka's broodlings in the sky. Similar to the Great Aerie, the Aerie of the Unfettered also sits atop an outcrop in the form of a rocky spire, but it cannot be more different in function. This area is only inhabited by dragons, specifically those of Dromoka's brood who have been punished or have no desire to interact with humanoids. However, they still remain loyal to Dromoka, defending her territory from other clans invading dragons. Lastly, we have Perugir Aerie, which we know from our Khans video used to be an outpost under Jeskai control. This outpost is now one of the main areas on the Salt Road, serving as the last stop for supplies and armaments before reaching the border of the other warring clans. The Dromoka use different forms of magic as they defend their lands. Most importantly is survival magic, consisting of sharpening and guiding their weapons to get the edge over their enemies. Dromoka clerics are often considered Sunbringers or Sandbringers. Sunbringers use the radiance and warmth of the sun to heal wounds, empower their troops, and even wield blasts of blinding light. Sandbringers use magic taught to them by the Aenok, creating powerful sandstorms to conceal themselves and distract and batter the enemy. Magic can also harden Dromoka armor, which can be seen in the popular magic card Hardening Scales. The flavor text on this card states, "Naga shed their scales. We wear ours with pride." Although this is an Abzan card, the tradition of brandishing the dragon scale is similar in the Dromoka clan as we discussed before. There are some magic traditions that died with the Abzan, however. As we briefly discussed in part 1 of the Fates of the Dragons video, Dagatar denounced the use of any ancestral magic in a plea for peace he made with Dromoka just before the Khanfall. You can read more about that in the story No End and No Beginning, which I will link below. Although most Abzan that stayed loyal to their forebears were wiped out by the Dromoka, some spirit speakers still practice the tradition of worshipping the kin trees where their ancestors lie hidden in the forest. This practice is outlawed by Dromoka as necromancy, but is the showcase of my favorite side story, The Guardian, which I highly recommend you read in the link I will provide in the description. In this story, we see Anafenza, not as the Khan of the Abzan as she was in another time, but as a high-ranking officer outnumbered and chased down by a band of Kolaghan raiders. One of these raiders we find out is Gravar Brazil, who is ironically one of her most loyal crewmar in the Khan's timeline. Her and another Dromoka Orit are cornered by Gravar's raiders at the foot of a tree in a small canyon, and are desperate to survive the battle. But I will let you read the rest, as the legend of Anafenza is passed down on the Dromoka troops, with some even believing to have seen the ghostly sand-swept shape of her battling alongside them. Spirit speakers say that her soul must have been stored in that kin tree somehow, so she could continue to live on Tarkir. If you really want to hear this story firsthand, I suggest reading it on the Magic website, but if enough people are eager to hear it, maybe I could do a reading in another video. Another figure that is briefly mentioned in that story is Commander Phaiso, the youngest commander in the Dromoka clan. He is a strategical genius, commanding thousands of humanoid troops and even dragons in 5 highly successful campaigns. The dragons respect his military orders almost as much as Dromoka herself. He is on top of the Dromoka clan for now, but we have yet to see how he deals with the failure on the battlefield. Lastly, for the Dromoka, we have Bahir Marza, a veteran Aenok mage practicing both the Sunbringer and Sandbringer styles. She wields this magic at an enormous scale, being able to inspire thousands of soldiers at once or create fierce storms of sand and light, wiping out other clans and troops. The name Bahir might sound familiar as she was aligned with the Temur in the Khan's timeline, leading us to our next clan, the Atarka. The Atarka embody the primal, endless hunger of the dragons in their clan. Within the clan, it is hunt or be hunted. Elk, mammoth, Krushuk, saberclaw, yeti, and even humanoids and dragons themselves are on the menu for the clan. The only thing keeping humanoids alive is the meat they provide for their dragon lord Atarka. Atarka's mood can change just as rapidly as the flash floods from melting glaciers in the mountains she reigns over. The Qualsizuma Mountains changed significantly when Atarka and her brood arrived, replacing most of the snow and ice with harsh fire and volcanic activity. These environmental conditions force the Atarka to survive on whatever they can, as sudden food shortages are common in the area. Megafauna like mammoths have even been wiped out from the mountain region due to the rapidly changing climate and endless hunger of the dragons and humanoids. The Atarka take pride in their ceaseless hunt, being held together by one common goal: to bring Atarka her endless bountiful feasts. At these feasts, the Atarka sing songs about their dragon lord and on the pleasure of the exhilaration of the hunt for which they constantly take part in to keep their dragon lord from getting too hungry. Atarka is constantly seeking her next meal, like a pompous queen demanding an extraordinary banquet, but she is keen on letting everyone know she is still the top predator in the mountain range. When she is not feasting, she takes part in her own hunt, or devours anyone in her clan that she deems not useful enough to keep alive, even her own brood. She has no time for negotiation, seeing any speech as a waste of time. Her only priority is to roast, gorge, and repeat. The only way for humanoids to stay alive in the clan is to be more valuable to Atarka than extra meat. They are constantly depleting the game resources of their environment, so they are highly nomadic, continuing their search for food. Although it is discouraged by Atarka, the humanoids of the clan use forms of concealment, including dressing in fur clothing with branches, leaves, and grasses attached to better stalk their prey. They also incorporate antlers into their armor to resemble the fiery, jagged horns of their ruthless ruler. But these antlers are not only used for dress. The few remaining shamans that survived Atarka's culling still secretly practice elemental magic while hiding deep in the mountains. To conceal their tradition and teachings, they opted out of transcribing pictures onto the walls of caves, but instead used claws, fangs, and antlers to carve their history into the bones. The shamans also perform elemental magic in secret, as Atarka saw it as a threat to her power, although she was not keen enough to understand the Wide Whisper. As we discussed in the Cons Part 2 video, the Wide Whisper is a form of telepathic communication the shamans have, allowing them to send messages to other shamans in the clan. When Atarka's reign started against the Temur and their shamans, the youngest of the magic users hid secretly practicing their shamanism in the mountains where pockets of elemental magic were found. Understandably, a lot of the shamans resented the abuse their new dragon overlord took part in on their fellow humanoids. One shaman in particular, Arel the Unseen Whisperer, envisions a different now, one without dragons, and hopes to rally her fellow shamans in a revolt against Atarka. Like most shamans, she spreads her thoughts and knowledge through the Wide Whisper, keeping her tradition alive. The center of this magical communication falls to the most magically sensitive shaman, who is currently Sakta. Although she is only just out of her teenage years, she is an amazingly powerful shaman and is even the main advisor to Suruk the Hunt Caller. Sakta and the other shamans proved their usefulness in the clan by serving as scouts for the various hunters throughout the clan, instead of concealing themselves from the main civilization as they did in another time. Shamans are joined in their worship of the elemental magic with the Efreet, who assimilated into the clan after the Atarka conquered the Fire Rim region of the Ajutai and named it Kadat. The Efreet used the nomadic ways of the Atarka to spread the glory of fire to all the world. Aenok are also still present in the Atarka society, although they are not as welcome as the Temur once made them. Even though the wolf-like humanoids join the humans to take part in the Great Hunt, they quickly take their spoils back to their den before the dragons find out where they are. To the dragons, the Aenok are just as delicious as the other fauna, such as bears and elk. Another humanoid that tries to avoid being on Atarka's menu are the ogres, a lumbering race of beasts that partake in the Great Hunt as well. However, Atarka and the humans see these beasts as competitions for meat, so they are to be destroyed on sight if the clan comes in contact with them. As mentioned before, the main force of the hunting parties are the humans, who are protected by an elite group within them called the Claw Bearers. They roam the outskirts of the Atarka territory, keeping an eye out for any rival clans that may be lurking in the forests surrounding the mountains. The most elite of the humanoids is the Hunt Caller, whose job differs from the time of the Khans, as they are the chief unit in charge of organizing the hunts and keeping Atarka fed. Atarka distributes her orders of what game to hunt or what treasures to steal from other clans through her Hunt Caller, and keeps tabs on them by assigning one of her loyal dragons to follow the hunt. Although in the story The Call, it is seen that some of her dragons do not have the best judgment, and the Hunt Caller has the freedom to use their own judgment to decide what is best for their dragon lord. Also featured in the story is Suruk, now the Hunt Caller of the Atarka, as the title Dragonclaw was outlawed many years ago. But as we see on the card Epic Confrontation, no matter the timeline, some legends endure. Showing Suruk is still as brutal as ever, punching out creatures, even dragons, with his bare hands. However, his loyalty now lies with Atarka, instead of his clan, and he takes great pleasure in procuring the most prized trophies and meat to bring back to his Dragon Lord in Iagor, the Dragon's Bowl. At Iagor, a location we knew as Karakik from our last Khans video, the dragons never fell to carve out the deep valley and protective overhangs like they did in the Khans timeline. Instead, Atarka makes the shallow valley into her own serving dish, where she awaits Suruk and the humanoid Atarka hunters to bring her enough meat to keep her satiated. The Atarka are sure to bring extra, as they know they will be on the menu if she's not satisfied. Now that we have a full understanding of the updates in the plane in the new timeline, let's pick back up where we left off with Sarkhan, taking in the sights and roars of his new timeline, a Tarkir of Dragons. Sarkhan arrives on his new world in the same spot he left, but now 1,000 years in the future. He looks down at the Hedrons holding Ugin's body, now covered in thick sheets of ice. He tries to reach out to him to hear his voice, but gets no answer, until he hears the low roar of dragons overhead. He did it. He saved his precious dragons. The chain of time has been reforged, he shouts, and he leaps into his dragon form to join his new dragon brethren, who are antlered just like the ones he met with Yasova. Sarkhan pauses to think what has become of her, curious to how long time has jumped and grateful that she had played her part to create this new now that he loved so much. He roared with his new horde, reveling in all the changes in Tarkir now that the dragons reigned. The land was riddled with ash and fiery chasms of dragonfire. As he flew, he notices all the different forms of dragons that now exist. Beasts that were slender and feathered, gliding effortlessly, others with thick armor flying low to the ground, and some that moved like snakes hiding out in temples throughout the jungle. But suddenly, as his brood flies through the steppe, they are alarmed by a bell. His fellow broodlings panic and start flying the other way, and Sarkhan notices the sound is coming from an orc in a small Mardu camp. And out of that camp came a slew of new dragons, streaming out of the encampment, beating their wings to the sound of the bell. Unlike the other dragons, Sarkhan was not scared of this wave of lightning-fast creatures. He was instead elated to see dragons and Mardu working together. But even more glorious was the sight of the familiar-looking Dragon Lord, great and powerful, with horns and snout he swore he could have seen before. As his mind wandered to this idea, he realized this dragon was the Dragon Throne of Tarkir in another timeline, reconstructed in the flesh from the actions of the past. But as they barreled toward him, he changed back into his human form to watch the battle unnoticed on the ground. But as he watched in awe, a smaller creature caught his eye. A goblin he recognized as Ankleshank. He ran to her, glad that she was alive in this new timeline, but realizes she's now called Vile Smasher and does not recognize him. As she squeals Intruder and Madman, she smashes a vial of dragonfire in a risky attempt to escape. Sarkhan turns back into dragon form for a split second to protect her from the blast. Hearing the commotion, Zurgo approaches, seeing Sarkhan as a pathetic raider. Sarkhan tries to tell Zurgo that he used to be the Khan of the Mardu, but Vile Smasher stops him, saying Khan is a forbidden word and Kolaghan will kill him. Zurgo, now called Bellstriker, tells Vilebreaker, purposely fudging her name, to let him speak as he has no need to stop a vagrant from getting killed. Confused and frustrated from being unknown in this time, Sarkhan then flies off and remembers Narset. Surely she would remember him, or at least he could rejoice in the Tarkir of Dragons with her. But as he makes his way through what he thought was the Jeskai territory, he realizes it is now controlled by the Dragon Lord Ajutai. After reaching the top of the Dragon's Eye stronghold, continuing his search, he runs into Taigam meditating in the tower. Taigam welcomes him as a student, but when Sarkhan asks about Narset, Taigam explains that Narset was a heretic and is no longer. As Sarkhan protests, saying that she must have lived, Taigam pushes him out the door with a magical fist strike. The next story takes us back in time to Narset's childhood, as she was at a market with her mother. This is an interesting setting because there are barely any stories of normal civilian life on Tarkir that don't involve great battles or terrifying destruction. This story shows Narset's acute senses of the world around her, as she takes note of all the things she sees and estimates how many apples are in a pile her mom is inspecting. Bored and tired of waiting for her mom to choose the perfect apple, she finds one she deems flawless and reaches for it, misjudging the stability of the pile and knocking the entire stack over, saving only the one she was aiming for. The merchant, outraged, yells at her to leave as she tries to tell him that he stacked the pile with 65 apples instead of the proper 66 that she estimated, and her mom took her by the wrist saying, "You have to learn to let things go," and tells her to wait outside the market as she tries to make things right. As she runs outside, delighting in all that nature has to offer and noting the different minutiae of ecology she sees, she realizes this is what she was meant to do: explore, study, learn, seek enlightenment. The last thought was not hers, but she hears another voice again: pure wisdom. That time she was certain it was not hers, and after a few more, gather knowledge, find truth. She realized the voice is coming from the distant dragon Ajutai, perched atop the Dragon's Eye Sanctuary. Somehow she can understand him, although he is way too far away and speaking in another tongue. Ajutai looks down from his perch towards Narset and stated that he is willing to teach those that are willing to learn. Starstruck, Narset accepted. From that day on, Narset would willingly go with her mom to the market, delighted that she let Narset stay outside so she wouldn't cause any more trouble. That is, if she would also come back to carry the grocery bags and wouldn't stray any farther than the riverbank, which worked out as she could see Ajutai perfectly from there. This was Narset's life for 3 years, learning the history of the dragons with Ajutai as the wisest of all dragons, of course, solving puzzles and riddles to train her mind in the draconic art of cunning, and practicing her balance and agility by mimicking the great teacher's movements, all along the banks of the river. She was even able to start spellcasting at a young age, studying to cast spells just like the dragons she learned so much about. But after all of this, she still craved more knowledge, and one day worked up the courage to ask Ajutai to show her the path so she could join him at his perch, but was interrupted by none other than Ishai, Ajutai's personal dragon speaker, as we discussed in our last video. She explains that Narset is very popular in the Dragon's Eye Sanctuary, and asked Narset if she would come with her to study with Ajutai and the other dragons, to which she agreed, and for the next few years she rose to be Ajutai's greatest student, having a mental connection with him that no other people could match. She learned faster than any student in the sanctuary, and her skill and knowledge impressed even Ajutai himself. She was finally at peace, no longer being distracted by her ambition and her desire for more knowledge. But some students, such as Taigam, who Narset beat in a sparring match, resented her and grew jealous of how quickly she rose past him. Eventually, at the young age of 15, Narset rose to the greatest title in the Ajutai, Master. But as she reached this ultimate title, she felt an uneasiness in her stomach. The feeling that you get when you reach the end of a grand story, that this is it, that there is nothing left to learn, nothing else to achieve. The restlessness she felt in the marketplace all those years ago returned, and like the child she was, she ran from the Dragon's Eye Sanctuary and Ajutai without saying a word. Her longing for a new journey brought her down to the ancient mountains of the once Jeskai strongholds, past secret doors and collapsed passageways and endless stairways until she came to a dead end. Although there was much more to explore in this room. Walls lined with scrolls, endless knowledge of a Tarkir forbidden by the dragons, a history wiped from the memory of the plane, about cons and magic that contradicted what the great teacher had taught her, and the ultimate lie. Ajutai was not the oldest dragon on Tarkir, nor the wisest. Had everything he taught been a lie? She raced back up the stairs to learn more, but was confronted by Taigam, who cursed her heresy and threatened to turn her into Ajutai. She blasted him out of the way with immense magical power and continued her journey to the archives under Quarry Mountain, Riverwheel, and eventually Durgar, where she found the archival room ransacked with only one scroll preserved. It mentions Sarkhan saving Ugin from death and the account of the story Khanfall, as described in our last video, where Ajutai and Salamgar teamed up to ambush the Khans as they met to discuss an alliance against the dragons. Horrified and intrigued by the news of this alternate history, an immense force pulled at her body. It was then that her spark ignited, ripping her from Tarkir. But as she experienced the sights and sounds of her new world, she pulled herself back into the archive once again. She continued her journey searching for answers across Tarkir, all the while feeling the pull, urging her to jump to a new plane, but she stayed and eventually ended up back where it all started, at the riverbank, to confront her teacher. But Narset was surprised that Ajutai had one more lesson to teach her. He did not scold Narset or try to lie again. He simply asked what she had learned. She replied, the truth. With that, Ajutai said, once we reflect, we must then move forward. All we need to do is... Before he finished his sentence, Narset replied, seek enlightenment. And with that, Ajutai realized he had nothing to teach his people and flew off. Narset thanked him for his wisdom. Although most of this is probably considered a side story, I think it is very important to highlight how Narset gained her spark and her relationship with the Jutai, as it is a major part of the Tarkir Dragonstorm storyline, which we will see in our next lore video that I hope to get out in the next couple of weeks. In our next story, however, we will dive right into the main storyline, with the events of the story Sorin's Revelation reprised on a new Tarkir, with Sorin's Restoration. We join Sorin, now searching for his friend Ugin, on Tarkir for the first time, as he's seared by the desert sun. As he watched the dragon circling overhead, he starts to doubt that Ugin is even alive, as the spirit dragon has not been seen for centuries. Guided only by the vague landmark of a spiraled rock his oracle foresaw, Sorin searches for days, leading him out of Kolaghan's steppe into the snow-covered mountains of Atarka. But as he loses sight of the rock, he is ambushed by a group of Atarka humanoids, accusing him of being Silumgar scum, and like in the previous timeline, he swiftly defeats them, turning one of them into his undead guide. As they walk, the guide explains the events of the Confall and how each clan now serves the dragons who derive their strength from Ugin. After hearing this, Sorin feels that Ugin must still be alive, but if he is, he will surely ask about Nahiri, who Sorin knew was a bit occupied at the moment. But that is a story for another video. Sorin now approaches Ugin's tomb, noticing the strange spiral rock that was created somehow through a massive force of energy and then refrozen into its shape. Then he noticed the Hedrons down below, and tensed as he thought the Lithomancer Nahiri might have been here and defeated Ugin. He felt the energy emanating from the Hedrons and knew he needed blood magic to interact with it, just like on Zendikar. Draining his enthralled servant, Sorin pointed his sword to the keystone of the Hedron formation, chanting an unbinding spell. And as he shot his sword up in the air, the Hedron cracked entirely, releasing Ugin from his tomb. Ugin noticed Sorin and asked if Bolas was here. Sorin realized Nahiri was not the culprit, but the dragon battling in the Oracle's vision was Nicol Bolas. And Ugin explains the events of the battle as Sorin explains that the Eldrazi were released, casually leaving out that he had a hand in letting them go. Ugin asks about Nahiri, and Sorin feels a small remnant of remorse, as he fed Ugin only what he needs to hear, that Nahiri is not on Tarkir, and he is reluctant to getting her to help out. As if speaking to a child, Ugin explains that Nahiri is necessary to make both Ugin's Ghostfire magic and Sorin's Bloodfire magic permanent and complete the spell, saying that whatever petty fight Sorin and Nahiri are in, it is meaningless. Then he flies off, telling Sorin to meet him at the Eye of Ugin. Sorin contemplates the predicament he is in and wishes for simpler times, when he only had to worry about his own issues. We now jump back to Sarkhan. After finding no luck searching for Narset in the old Jeskai Mountains, he changes course to now find how Ugin has fared after his 1,000-year rest. He flies over Tarkir in his dragon form and contemplates how the plane has changed. Then he suddenly sees a bolt of light emanating from the canyon where Ugin's Hedron cocoon lie. On his way to the canyon, he is attacked by ghostly dragons using an invisible fire, just as Ugin used. He outpaced the dragons as they gave up pursuit and headed into the clouds. When Sarkhan reached the canyon, he saw the Hedron tomb had been broken. Ugin must have lived and broken free. He then noticed Ugin floating, looking away from him to more spirit dragons, viewing a strategic map of Tarkir, with all dragon clans' locations accounted for, and even Sarkhan himself. Ugin turned to Sarkhan as the spirit dragons departed. Ugin apologized for his followers' actions and asked Sarkhan to explain what has occurred, to which Sarkhan was looking for Ugin to answer. Ugin pulled out the Hedron shard and explains he knows it's from the Eye of Ugin, but if it was removed while he was alive, Ugin would have been notified. Sarkhan then explains who he is and the Tarkir of Khans he was born in and how Ugin was speaking to him. He recounts gaining his spark after Ugin's spirit told him of great dragons and reluctantly reveals how he was tricked by Nicol Bolas into releasing the Eldrazi on Zendikar. As Ugin seems visibly flustered by the mention of his name, Sarkhan explains that Bolas is hungry for power. Ugin then asks what Sarkhan's ambition is. Sarkhan replies that he vows for revenge against Bolas and to be free from his clutches. Ugin asks more about his journey, and Sarkhan explains he fought with two Planeswalkers, a Pyromancer and a Mind Mage, who we know as Chandra and Jace. They knocked him out and left him there at the Eye. He then returned to Bolas with the Hedron shard, and Bolas told him that he killed Ugin and mentioned something about a failsafe. Sarkhan then recounts the rest of his story, with Narset helping him to open Ugin's nexus, and a brief history of what Sarkhan knew about the past 1,200 years, on the new Tarkir after Ugin fell. Sarkhan was surprised Ugin knew none of this and asked him for his side of the story. Ugin explains that he only remembered being put in the Hedron cocoon by Sarkhan, then waking up after Sorin opened it. He asks Sarkhan if he knows Sorin, but Sarkhan does not. Sarkhan, still wanting to know more, asks what happened to Narset and the world he was born in, to which Ugin replies, "It is gone. She is gone. Not only gone, the world you remember never existed, and its people met very different fates." Ugin then explains that the events that unfolded for Sarkhan to save Ugin must have happened, or else Ugin would not be here. The Hedron Shard and Sarkhan's path both existed, and changed time on Tarkir, and only Tarkir, but somehow let Sarkhan travel through it. Ugin explains, "You, Sarkhan Vol, stepped fully formed out of a shadow, a place that never existed." To which Sarkhan replied, "Then in this world's history, I was never born. I sprang from the sky one day, like a dragon." To which Ugin disagrees, saying that Sarkhan is more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Sarkhan, in disbelief that Narset is gone, effortlessly turns into his dragon form and flies off to find her. Not having to look far, he sees her trudging through the snow and turns back into his human form to greet her. He notices that she looks a little different now, likely from her spark that was ignited in this world, that lay dormant in another. She does not recognize him, but she recognizes the name Sarkhan, as she read about him in the annals of the Sage Eye on her journey. She says she is going to find Ugin and is surprised when Sarkhan knows exactly where he is. Sarkhan asks how she knows him. While confused, she describes the mysterious history and the secret text that she read. Sarkhan confirms these stories are true. Narset then explains that she traveled to another world, surprised how well Sarkhan understands her story. She insists on staying on track to speak with Ugin and then find the sacred mammoth tusk carving that holds more history of Tarkir. The carving Yasova created centuries ago, and as they walk towards Ugin, Sarkhan asks her if she's going to Planeswalk again. She replies, "Someday I will, but this world has secrets enough. For right now, I'm right where I need to be." To which Sarkhan replies, "I know exactly what you mean." And that is where we'll leave off, with a very open-ended ending to the original Tarkir block. I've listened to all of the Tarkir Dragonstorm story, so I have an idea of how the Spirit Dragons are created and where Narset ends up, but I'm excited to dive deep into what happened between these stories, like how the Phyrexian invasion and the Omen Pass affected Tarkir as we dive into the Planeswalker guides for the next lore video. I hope everyone likes these types of videos, as I have a bunch more planned after we finish up Tarkir Dragonstorm. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and if there are any other stories or planes you want me to dive into next. But that being said, thank you so much everybody for watching, and please like and subscribe if you want to see more. Have a good one.